For those of you in the audience who don't know, can you explain what MasterClass is? Give us your elevator pitch.
How many of you would ever want to learn from somebody like Steph Curry or Annie Leibovitz or Martin Scorsese? Even if you don't believe that, you can put your hand up, so it looks fair. Yeah. So the idea is that we do online classes that are from the absolute best in the world, and we launched about 3.5 years ago.
So if somebody were going to try just one class to give them a flavor, what would you recommend? And if you didn't know anything about the person's interest, if you just wanted to showcase the best of?
We did a class from Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer is a film composer. Hans Zimmer has composed songs for almost every single film that you have ever seen. I had never heard of Hans Zimmer beforehand. I'm not very good with beats and rhythm. Hans Zimmer changed how I hear music. He starts a class with saying every time you play a note, what it does is it asks a question and it then answers it. And I was like, what kind of crap is that? And then he plays it on the keyboard and you're like, holy shit. And it has changed how I hear music.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So how did you come up with the idea for this?
So it's a funny story. So I actually was working in venture capital for a guy by the name of Michael Deering, who is brilliant.
And your former professor, right?
And my former professor back at Stanford. And I was working for him. And after about a year, I actually missed building stuff. So I went to him one day and I was like, hey, Michael, thanks so much. I want to go start something. And he's like, you don't want to be an investor anymore? And I said, I really miss building. And Michael was really great and said, why don't you come to me and propose what you would want to build? And so I went to him and I said, okay, here's how much money I want. I'm going to go explore ideas. Michael said I would need double that amount of money. Michael was, of course, right. And then I actually ran outside and I called my mom and I told her. And my mom's first response was, is he an idiot? And I was like, Mom. And she's like, David, I love you, but why would he invest in you without an idea or a team? And I said, because he believes in your son, Mom. And she, of course, said, I'm sorry, I love you. And, it seems really awesome. It seems like a great opportunity. It's actually really scary because I knew this was going to be the only chance in my life I was going to have that I could have this kind of blank check. And I wanted to do something that was going to have an impact on the world. And so one of the first things I did was I actually posted an ad on Craigslist in small farm towns. And I offered people $8 to $12 if I could talk to them about their education. Because I wanted to meet people that weren't like me. And I talked to a bunch of folks and heard horrible stories how people are ripped off on their education. And so I actually built a fake website that had 100 different online classes that I didn't have. And I bought ad traffic to them. And I tried to see if people would try to buy them. I then started feeling really, really bad about that. So anybody who tried to sign up, I actually gave them a free gift card. And I set up a 1-800 phone number that went to my cell phone. So I got lots of calls, so I got to talk to these people. And I remember after a week or two, I showed the results back to Michael, and he's like, I don't know what you have here, but go. Because the results were great. And that was the beginning of MasterClass.
So is that trying to figure out which classes would be most popular and so on?
Yeah, I was unsure if people would even want to pay for classes that were not going to necessarily be for school credit.
So were you advertising celebrity names with those classes?
Excellent question. Absolutely not, because I did not want to be sued. So it was instructors that we invented. Okay. But I then thought, okay, if we keep pushing on that, if filmmaking does well, you keep thinking of who's the best filmmaking instructor I could get, and you keep pushing, you're like, why can't it be Martin Scorsese? And then the next question is, how the fuck are you going to get him to actually teach? Everybody told us it was going to be impossible to get any of these people to actually teach. I don't come from that world, so I can't call them. One of the things that's nice in tech is if you ask a friend for an intro, the person will make it, and the person will then actually write back to you. I don't know anybody that knows Martin Scorsese, and I've learned in the entertainment business, it's not that same way that if I just send an email or somebody sends an email, I don't get a response back. So I had to figure out a way of how to get these people.
So I'm told I should ask about your grandmother. Was she the hidden conduit to Martin Scorsese?
So my grandmother was actually a big inspiration to go down this path. I was nervous to go down education because I care a lot about it, but there are a few ed tech firms and companies that have done really, really great. And so I kept thinking back, and one of the stories I kept thinking back of was actually from my grandmother. So my grandmother helped raise me, and I remember I was in 2nd grade, so I don't know, you're 8 or 9 or 10 years old, and I went to her house after school one day. And I was complaining to her about all the math homework I had to do, which obviously was not a lot because I'm like 8, 9, or 10. And she tells me that she has a story she wants to tell me. And again, as an 8, 9, or 10-year-old, that's like the last thing that you want to hear. And she tells me the story. So my grandmother was 16 years old and living at the time in Krakow, Poland. Her and her mom went on a family vacation. Dad was supposed to join, but stayed home a couple extra days to take care of work. And while she's on vacation, the Germans invaded. They took everything and they killed her father. She flees to New York City. The only job she can get is on a factory floor, works on the factory floor, decides that she wants to become a doctor. Finds every medical school that she's able to find and applies, over 25 schools. And she got a no from every single school. She keeps working the factory floor, applies again the next year, all 25, gets a no again. But this time what she decides to do is she's going to call the deans of admissions and ask, why am I not getting in? They all hung up on her, except for one, who says, I'll be honest, you have 3 strikes against you. You are a woman, you are a foreigner, and you're Jewish. Hangs up the phone. She goes back to the factory, she applies again the next year, and she gets into one school and becomes a pediatrician. And I'm staring at her because at age 8, 9, or 10, this is heavy shit to be hearing. And her response to me is, David, the point I'm trying to make to you is education is the only thing that a person can't take away from you. And that kind of was ingrained in me at a very early age. So our parent company is actually named after her. And that was like the push that got me to actually go do this.
That's a great story. And so did you ever get to Martin Scorsese?
Yep, Martin Scorsese, we filmed, and the class is launched. If you haven't taken that class, it's amazing. For 6 hours, I step back. We actually were talking to him about what does he want to teach and how, and he's like, the only way to learn film is to watch film. So I think it's in total of 8 hours. You're sitting with Martin Scorsese as he breaks down film. Compared to a Ron Howard, who we did a class from on directing, who's like, the last thing you want to do is watch film. What you have to do is actually make film. And so for Ron Howard's class, it's just him making film.
Okay, I'm remembering this thing, it was called like Mystery Science Theater 2000, where there were like 3 goblins or something that would watch the movie with you, and I'm picturing Martin Scorsese just kind of riffing about the movies. Is that sort of what he does?
I don't know that reference.
It might be way before your time.
Reference. I can try to imagine it. Okay. He is like dissecting frame by frame. Okay. So it's things like it's not like funny.
Okay. Wait. Okay. Well, I find it funny.
No.
So tell us a little bit about how it's set up. How do you make money with it? It sounds like you have a model where you can buy per class or sign up for unlimited, right?
Yeah. So what we launched with was per class, at each class at $90.
Mm-hmm.
But that. At the end of last year, that started being expensive to take all our classes. And a big part of what our goal, our mission is to make it possible for anybody in the world to learn from the absolute best. So we did lots of testing, and what we rolled out was for $180 a year, you get access to everything. That just blew up. That's now over 80% of our revenue. And off that, we've just raised about $80 million off that success.
Great. And how do you compensate the instructors?
Yeah, it's a mix of structure on the deals, but most of it we pair with we want to make a deal that they share in the upside. Yeah.
So you pay them a retainer and then portion of the revenue?
Yeah,
from?
it depends on the instructor. So it's a mix of either a fee or a back end.
Okay. And then can you explain a little bit about, are there some classes that are surprisingly popular that you, or some subject areas where you didn't expect there to be as much interest as there?
Yeah, sure. I'm not surprised that like a cooking class from Chef Ramsay does well, or a Steph Curry class does well. I'm surprised by some other folks. So we have a class from a guy by the name of Dead Mouse. How many of you have heard of Dead Mouse? All right. That class is phenomenal, and it's like a total surprise. He is a EDM artist, for those who don't know, who always wears a actual mouse full helmet because he's afraid of people. He literally can't play music. So when he writes songs, he like drags the notes on the screen up until he hears a sound he likes. I mean, that's a crazy way to write a song. And that, I mean, his class is on how to write EDM tracks, and that as well. So I think we actually just launched a class from Chris Hadfield, the commander of the International Space Station, much less well known than Steph Curry, Chef Ramsay. That also does great. So I think the ones I'm surprised by are the ones that are lesser known.
Okay. And then can people get credentials from taking any of these courses?
Excellent question. No, they can't right now.
Okay. So a few years ago, there were all those online schools that came up, and in some ways they disappointed because there was an expectation that every student who signed up to take a class would finish it, and it turned out the dropout levels were quite high. It sounds like what you're doing is a little bit different, but suppose somebody asks to compare you to Coursera or a school like that.
Yeah, I don't know all the stats of Coursera, but compared to other MOOCs, average MOOC sees about 4% of people finish a class. Our rates are between 5 to 8x that. In part, I really believe that education, and especially online education, is stuck in how it was when we were all in school and you just film what's in the classroom, put it on the web. When if you actually want to make great, compelling education, it should be just as engaging as watching a movie. So we bring on actually a lot of filmmakers to help us make the class besides educators. So as a result, we see much higher rates of how people engage. But one of the most interesting things for us is because it's not for school credit, you actually follow what you're interested in. And so as a result of that, this is like a crazy stat, but I think this is roughly right. A third of the people who who started with the Steph Curry class on basketball end up taking a class on screenwriting. And what you see in all of us is that we actually have things that we care about extremely deeply in, but there's also lots of things that we just want to know a bit about. So we see, which was something we weren't sure we were, is that people actually want that breadth.
Okay. And also, you have an amazing breadth of courses up on the site. So can you explain how you did connect with a bunch of those people? For example, Malcolm Gladwell, was that just a matter of finding out who his agent was, or is there some very creative way, especially when you were starting and nobody had heard of MasterClass? How did you do that?
It was really hard. It was really hard. It probably took us a year. I mean, we cold emailed and cold called everybody who we could. Lots of people said that we would never be able to sign these people. After we signed them, they of course said, "Oh, of course I told you you were going to be able to sign them." One story I remember, we wanted a class from James Patterson. James Patterson is the best-selling author in the world. And I cold emailed everybody I could. I cold emailed everybody I could find on the web. His speaking agent, his PR person. The only response I got was from a guy who claimed to be his speaking agent.
David, how did you decide you wanted David Patterson? Was it just because he is the top-selling author, or was there something about him that made you think he'd be good at teaching?
We did lots of work to figure out. We do lots of work to figure out who people want to learn from. Okay. It's a combination of who is one of the best in the world, who's somebody you think you can actually learn from. There are certain people. I shouldn't maybe say this out loud, but one of the people who people love but they don't want to learn from. Is actually Will Smith. Will Smith, I actually love as an actor, and I think it's really great. People don't want to learn from him because it's really interesting, even though he has one of the most fans on Facebook and in the world, is because when you ask them, they say, He's tall and handsome and funny. Like, I can't be those things. And so people want somebody who they feel they can learn from. I think of this example a little bit with like Steph Curry. Steph Curry, I think I could be Steph Curry. Steph Curry is 6'1", 180 pounds. Obviously, I can't be Steph Curry, but like compare him to Shaquille O'Neal. I feel like if I was born like Shaq, I'd be a Hall of Famer too. That's obviously not true, but there's something about feeling that I can learn from somebody.
Okay, so you felt like you could learn from David Patterson.
The world felt that they could learn from James Patterson.
Okay, so you decided you'd set your sights on him, and then I kind of interrupted you.
Yeah, so I cold emailed everybody I could. The only response we got was from a guy who claimed to be his speaking agent. I was so excited. Go back. Me and my co-founder Aaron go prepare a pitch. We go pitch him, and the guy says, "Sorry, James isn't interested." I was really heartbroken. It was the first hot lead we had in a long time. And then I'm walking down the street in Los Angeles, and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize. And I say, "Hey, this is David." And this guy goes, "Hi, I'm Jim Patterson." I was like, "The author?" He goes, "Yes." I was like, "I'm very surprised to hear from you." He's like, "I'm a surprising guy." Fair. He's like, "Well, if the timing works, I would love to teach." And I was like, "Sorry, I'm pretty confused right now because I just thought I got to know." And he said, who was I spoke to? And I spoke to him. He's like, "I don't know who the fuck that person is." And I said, "I don't even understand the con. Why would a guy pretend to be your agent and not take the money?" And then in my head, the first thing that goes to my mind is like, how do I know this is really James Patterson? It was really James Patterson. And James Patterson taught a class that if you haven't been in that class, it's actually amazing. It changed how I write.
Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
you've changed how you listen to music. You've changed how you write.
Yeah.
Have you
But
changed anything else?
I'm still bad at basketball.
So can you tell us, is there a new area that you're going to get into now, or a new push in terms of subject matter?
Yeah, so what we're seeing from our users and student base is they want more breadth. So we're going to go into business, into how to run for office, how to actually govern. Over the next year, will be lots of new categories.
So should any VCs in the audience be kind of sucking up to you a little bit to get that slot as the first VC on MasterClass? Do you have some candidates?
I would love if they want a second. We're probably not going to do venture for a little bit. The reason why is in testing, we see that there's lots of free content that you guys do in a whole lot of depth. What? It is good marketing. So we probably aren't going to do it for a little bit. We will do an investing class, but it won't be venture.
So it'll be more like shares, like stock market investing. Okay, got it. And then could you tell us a little bit about your backers? You mentioned Michael Deering, and then you've had a few rounds now, right? So could you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, so today we've raised about $130 million. Our last round was led by the folks at IVP, who have been great, and the round before that with the folks at NEA.
Okay.
Before that, Javelin. Before that, Michael Deering.
And so did he introduce you to all those subsequent investors?
I don't remember, but Michael was definitely helpful in it. I can remember if he actually made the intros.
Okay. So when was it clear that you were gaining traction at around which round, would you say?
So the first day, this is a product that was very hard to do, like lean startup, where you just put stuff out there because you can't put out stuff there that's bad with these people. So
and it sounds expensive.
Yeah. And so we're working on classes for a year and a half before launch, and then it's a launch day, which I've been waiting for forever. And you expect the first day to be like 10x what your second day is, right? Because all this press, all this attention. And we launched the first day, and sales, if that was 10x, that was bad. And I actually went home that day and I actually cried because I was like, I've been working on this for 2 years. If you put all the time in and got all these people on board, and this isn't going to work. And the next day I walk in the office and I see our head of paid marketing, this guy named Reed Benson, who's wonderful, and I saw him smiling. And I was like, Reed, why are you smiling? He's like, this is going to be a big business. And I was like, what? How do you know that? He's like, have you seen our CACs? And I was like, no. And then day 2 was above day 1, and day 3 was bigger. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God. And so it was probably like day 3 that we realized that there was traction. And then we raised more, I don't know, a month or 2 later.
So how much had you raised by launch?
$6 million-ish.
So you'd had a Series A, and that was it?
We had a Series A and a kind of a seed.
Okay.
Yeah, before launch.
Got it. And then is this the kind of business where you worry about copycats?
In the beginning, yeah, for sure. Now, not so much. Instructors can't teach anywhere else. They're exclusive to us. And now we have such a group of instructors that lots of people come to us.
Okay. So after this next question, I'm going to see if there are any audience questions. But I was wondering if you had any advice to give to entrepreneurs in the audience who are thinking of building some sort of platform.
Yeah. Raise money before launch. It's much easier to raise on vision than it is on traction, especially early on. Things will take you twice as long and cost twice as much as you ever thought, so always raise more money. And I underestimated the strength of network effects on the supply side. So for us, our instructors have become a network effect where they actually beget other instructors. And I underestimated that kind of strength of that.
Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Me? Yes. Hi, I'm Shannon from Crunchbase. Hi. So my question is, your marketing seems incredibly powerful because I've heard of you. My niece in South Africa just wanted to do the Annie Leibovitz,
like your niece already.
masterclass. Exactly. Yeah, she's 13, interested in photography. So when did you start kicking in with a huge marketing spend? Because it seems like you spend on marketing, or you're doing a very good job on marketing. So I was just interested in that.
I mean, my rule on paid marketing is to only spend if it is only if you're going to make money off it. And so all the paid spend, we make money at that at the actual sale level. It just happens to be that on social and on the web, it's a great market for us because I can target people who like photography. And especially early on, this wasn't a thing that you searched for. You never searched for the idea, can I take a photo class from Annie? So it was definitely for us in the beginning, much more the marketing was push marketing. Now people actually search for this, right? But it's just been an effective channel for us. It's been really great.
Any other questions? So I was wondering, actually, some of your instructors, if you want to find out how they work their craft, the only place to really go is MasterClass. But for others, like let's say Gordon Ramsay, you can take watch a million shows. How do you make sure what they're doing is different to what's available elsewhere? Or maybe that doesn't matter.
No, it's a really great question. It's really important. We were actually very scared with launching a class like him because there's so much stuff about him. We found that being exposed and being out there actually only seems to help us, in part because there's lots of stuff out there, but there's nothing where he's going for 6 hours in depth on how to cook. So our team works with the instructor to figure out what things do they want to teach, what things do we all want to learn from them, and what things have they never talked about before. As a result, when we film, it's an emotional experience. For these instructors, it is usually deep and emotional. A lot of our instructors end up crying during filming, and it's on camera.
Gordon Ramsay did not end up. Gordon Ramsay told me to fuck off one time. I don't believe he ended up crying on your.
Gordon Ramsay swells up a little bit. No, there are no tears. But he talks about how he became a chef and why he became a chef. So I don't know if you know this. He actually didn't want to be a chef. He wanted to be a football player, and he got a really bad leg injury. And so the only thing he thought of to make money was to serve food, and then that's led him to being a chef. And so that part he gets a bit emotional about. But Chef Ramsay does say fuck a lot, but he's actually a really nice person.
No, he told me fuck off love. So,
see,
yeah.
I was just wondering what your consumption model looks like. Is it a lot of snacking on the phones, or is it 42-inch TV in the living room, or are they taking notes at the desk?
Great question. Before we launched $180, the option to subscribe to all classes, it was you watch it and you take notes. $180 totally changed how people consume it. Oftentimes still at home on the big screen, or an iPad. People, they usually do it in chunks. So they sit down for half an hour and consume. They then come back and consume more. So it's definitely in chunks. People seem to do one class at a time. So you go through as much as you're going to go through on Chef Ramsay. You're then going to go over to Jane Goodall. But you definitely do it kind of in class chunks. Yeah, it's a really good question, though.
Yes.
Hi, I love MasterClass. Congratulations. Who is your target audience?
Oh, excellent question. This is like really hard, actually. I spent a bunch of time I actually worked and interned at IDEO, which is very much about like you have to know who your audience is. And so I've been for 3.5 years. I've been trying to sort this out. It's actually really tricky for us because we don't see trends across age, across gender. How we talk about it internally is before the subscription, it was a big chunk of them were actually pros. I'm a professional in that category. I want to get better for my job. The second group was I love this as a passion. What we've seen now since launching All Access Pass was it's this new group of people that people just love to learn and believe that if I learn, my life will be better. But there's no very big trends on the demo side.
David, thank you so much for your
Thanks for having
insights.
me.
Yeah.